Hi everyone, it's Carrie, aka Nerdy Girl Creates. Welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I am trying to get back into a 3 video a week schedule. Lately, I've been having a lot of issues in my personal life, as well as trying to balance my day job with content creating, and it has been a bit of a challenge, as you might have noticed. But hopefully, going forward, I can get back into a regular schedule. And I'm going to start with today on a topic I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and that is why I think comic book readers should give manga a chance. And the reason I bring this up is the whole reason I started my channel. A lot of us who have been longtime comic book fans have been frustrated with the recent changes within DC and Marvel. A lot of us don't like the direction they're going in. We kind of feel like we're being alienated by the new custodians of DC and Marvel, as you could say it. And we're kind of missing that thrill we get from reading comics. And I thought it was a great idea to get this channel going to introduce my fellow comic book readers to options such as indie comics, back issues, and most importantly, manga. Now, I know manga at sometimes is not very well received by those who are comic book readers. They kind of look at it in a way where they don't take it as seriously, or they're not fond of the style of the manga. For example, there's always the one thing I hear a lot. They don't like manga because it's not colored. They don't like reading in the opposite direction. They think some of the characters look too cartoony, and that's understandable. But I think if comic book readers can get past that, they can find some very high quality storytelling in manga. Because manga is more than just Pokemon. It is more than just, what can I say, Dragon Ball. There is a lot of very good, diverse storytelling in manga, and it gets overlooked quite a bit by those outside the manga community. And I'm hoping with this video to give some good reasons why comic book readers who are looking for a new outlet should give manga a chance. Now, the first reason I think comic book readers should give manga a chance is actually something I've heard a lot from people who wanted to get into comic books but have a hard time getting into comics, but find it easier jumping into manga. And that is, manga has a starting point. What do I mean by that? Well, with comic books, these characters have gone through so many retcons, so many different multiverses, continuity issues. I mean, there have been storylines that were originally not part of continuity that have now become continuity. There have been changes to origins. It's really hard to find a point for a new comic book reader to jump in and get into the characters such as Superman, Batman, X-Men, etc. There isn't really like a book or a multiple books somebody could sit down and say, you want to get into X-Men, this is where you start. Because there isn't. You can go back to the original debut of most of these characters, and a lot has changed since then. So there's going to be a lot of confusion. There's going to be a lot of material to read, and it can become frustrating. It's like trying to get on a train that's moving fast and waiting for a door to be opened and hoping you jump and don't miss. I know that's a weird analogy, but it's pretty much that's how comic books feel. Now, as manga is really easy. If you want to get into One Piece, you start with Volume 1. You want to get into Naruto, you start with Volume 1. You want to get into Bleach, Volume 1. There is no multiverse, there is no continuity issues as much as comics. There is, one simple 1 through how many volumes there is. And some manga can go from just 10 volumes to 30-something volumes, or if you're One Piece, you just released your 100th volume, which is over 1,000 chapters, but you could still read 1 through 100, and get the complete story and not feel like you're missing out on something. And that's where manga succeeds, where comic books fail, in my personal opinion. So it's like you want to switch into manga, it's going to be easy to start off in. Plus, like I said, there's no continuity issues as bad as comics. There are no multiverses where there's another version of the character existing somewhere else, or we're going to merge those two characters to make the character new. Unless that's the story for the manga, but there really isn't any of those type of issues. So to get into manga, it's way easier than to get into comic books. So if you want to even try to get into manga, all you have to do is pick up volume 1. Now, what I suggest from past experience, if you want to read a story, I always suggest reading at least 3 volumes before deciding if you like or don't like it. Because I learned my lesson with One Piece. You hear me talk about it all the time. But it's the truth. I wasn't so crazy about One Piece after the first few chapters, but then as the East Blue arc progressed, I should say, it got way better. And now it's probably like my top favorite manga series. So I would suggest always read at least 3 volumes before deciding if you want to get out of it. Now, another reason, and I did a poll recently on Twitter for my subscribers on what would be a good reason for you to switch from comics to manga, and the number 1 reason was story. And there is great story development in manga. If you saw my live stream a couple weeks ago with Gabriel Hernandez, we talked about My Hero Academia, which is pretty much a love letter to Western comic books. And in that story, your main character, Midori, also known as Deku, goes through the hero's journey. He has to earn the powers that he is going to inherit, and then once he gets the powers, he has to learn to harness them. He develops over time, he finds ways to control it, he finds new abilities, he gets knocked down, he gets back up. It makes him a very relatable character. And you have this great mentor in All Might who is guiding Deku through his journey. Where you go over to modern DC and Marvel, there's a lot of new characters that got introduced. And most of them, I'm not going to say every because there's a few exceptions, most of them don't seem to have earned their abilities. Most of them don't seem to have been given a story arc to explain their journey into becoming a hero. There's a lot of arrogance, I hate to say it, with some of these characters, a lot of defiance, and it doesn't make them likable at all. You've probably seen my video about unlikable characters, but it doesn't make them likable at all. Where you have somebody like Deku who you see keeps trying, and no matter how many times he fails, he gets up and does it again. Another great example is Naruto. Naruto is a very popular series. You mostly probably seen the anime, but he's a character who's been shunned by his village because he is the host to a fox demon, and he is determined to become the leader of his village, and he wants to harness his ninja skills. He looks at Sasuke, the number 1 student in his school, as his adversary, is the guy he needs to beat. And he fails a lot. He gets laughed at a lot, but he keeps on going. And if you follow the journey of Naruto, you see where he ends up, and it's like worth the journey. I don't feel it too much with characters in DC and Marvel anymore. I don't feel like a lot of them earned their place. Another thing is, and this is something I've heard from a lot of people, and I've seen it on other manga YouTuber channels who've talked about why they left comics for manga. And their biggest reason was not just the story, not just character development, not starting points, but they go on about how characters in DC and Marvel are stuck in like a never-ending purgatory. Like, there's nothing, nobody seems to be able to come up with anything new for the characters to develop, or a new challenge for them to overcome. And it's repetitive. And they're annoyed with it. It gets boring. where you have characters in manga where there is not only a starting point, but there's an ending. So during that beginning and end, there is a full journey of this character going up against their adversaries, developing their skills, becoming the hero they're meant to be, and succeeding in the end. And the ending could be heartwarming, it could be tragic, but still there is a development and there is an ending. And it feels so much more sincere, if that's the right word, than it does in comics at times. Because Batman is forever battling villains in Gotham. And he's always battling the same villains. Once in a while you might get a new character, but it's always the same villains with the same ending, only to repeat itself again in the next few issues. And manga, no. Even with a series as long as One Piece, there is a development. There are new adversaries for Luffy and his Straw Hat crew to face, and each time Luffy discovers a new ability about himself, Zoro develops a new skill, everybody advances, and they take down the next challenge and then go to the next one, and eventually the story will end. Another thing, and this is like the biggest problem in comic books, and it's something that's, at this point, it's become a joke. It's even become a meme. In comic books such as DC and Marvel, death doesn't mean anything anymore. If a character dies, it's more of a countdown until when will they come back. So nobody takes death seriously anymore in a comic book. However, in a manga, a majority of the time, when a character dies, they die. And it helps progress the story. You know, it has some effect on the main characters. And it influences what is going to happen next. In comic books, it's just kind of like, okay, well, Wolverine's dead again. How long before he comes back? You can't take it seriously in DC and Marvel. But in manga, it is something that is permanent, and it is something that helps the story, and it's very important to the character who's the lead to deal with. So again, story development is a big reason a lot of my friends who used to read a lot of comics and why they got into manga. And what my poll even indicates, story development, great storytelling, that's the number one reason they've switched to manga. Now, the next reason I think people should give manga a chance is new characters. Now, DC and Marvel, yeah, there have been a lot of new characters, but have they been interesting characters? Maybe one or two here and there, but a lot of them haven't been, because I think the biggest thing is DC and Marvel feel like the only way a new character could be accepted is if they take on the mantle of another more popular character. And it gets annoying because they can't seem to stand out on their own as a character. And sometimes it works, like, if it's a core like Green Lantern, you're going to expect more Green Lanterns, as long as the character's written well and there's a purpose for them to be there. But most of the time, it feels kind of like, well, you're kind of giving this character a disadvantage because you feel like Miles Morales won't be accepted unless he is Spider-Man. You don't feel like a character who is known as Swordmaster, who could have had a great development story, could have done well. But instead, you've abandoned that and made him the new Iron Fist. Nobody wants that. In manga, you're always getting introduced to new characters. There's always a new story being dropped with new characters, with new purpose, new enemies, or whatever type of genre you're reading. There's new characters, and they're not taking on the mantle of somebody else. There are rare exceptions, but even then, they're not like the original character. And I'll give an example. We talked about Naruto earlier. There is a series called Boruto. Yes, the name is very familiar. That's one of the things I laughed about with this series. But he is the son of the original character Naruto. Now, he might look like Naruto, and he might have some personality traits that are similar to Naruto. However, I kind of feel like he has his own power set. He also has a different life experience than what Naruto had. His friendships are not exactly similar to that of Naruto. He's grown up in a more safe, accepting environment than Naruto did. And again, his power set is not based on a demon inside his body. At least we don't think it is. And he's introduced to new villains to tackle. Yes, he's the son of a very famous manga character, but he's still different from that manga character. Where I feel like in DC and Marvel, they don't know how to do that anymore. There was a time like Wally West had a completely different personality from Barry Allen, and over time he earned the right to take on the mantle of Flash when Barry Allen died. The only thing they did to kind of like ruin that was to bring Barry Allen back. If they kept Barry Allen dead, it would have felt more earned for Wally. But it's like now we're just going to throw mantles on characters that there was no development with, no introduction to, and we're supposed to just accept them as the new, say, Captain America, the new Iron Man, the new Batman, the new whatever. And if people are kind of like turned off by that, they want the original character, most of the time, the original character who had that mantle or that name. In the case of Thor is his name, but yet they gave it to Jane Foster, which I was not a big fan of. I know it has its fan base, but I didn't like it. In manga, new characters all the time. There might be some similarities in situations because you can't really create completely new things. Like, for example, Supernatural, you're going to be fighting supernatural elements. It's not like you can come up with some new type of thing that's... I mean, maybe you could. I'm rambling now. And another thing with the new characters in manga is they rarely depend on agenda-driven reasons to promote them. I think the biggest example of this right now is Jonathan Kent. You've heard a lot of comic book YouTubers go on and on about Jonathan Kent. I have started to read Super Sons by Pete Tomasi, and it's really good. And I feel like they did a lot of disservice to Jonathan Kent to age him up. And the biggest way they could promote him now as a teenage hero is to just focus on his sexuality. And I think, maybe the story is good. I have not read the new Superman books with Jonathan Kent as Superman. I'll be honest, because I'm just kind of like over the mantle swapping. But you take away, if there is a good story there, you take away from it by focusing only on something like his sexuality. And it shouldn't be important. There is a lot of LGBT characters in manga, but that's not the main focus unless it's something like a romance or it's specifically in that genre. But there are a lot of characters who are, but it's not like, look at me, look what my sexuality is. No, it's more about what the character is going through and what the story is. And that's what I like about manga a lot, and I wish comic books would take some cues from that and realize that, yeah, it's great to have diversity, but it shouldn't just be all about diversity. You need something in there more. You need a story, because diversity can only take you so far in a story before it falls off the charts and people move on to something else. That's my opinion. And I think the hardships these new characters go through, the developments they go through, like Deku and My Hero Academia, makes them far more relatable than just the diversity factors about them. Because for me growing up, I felt connection to a lot of characters. And I'll give an example. Spider-Man, male, teenager living in New York City, me, girl, growing up in upstate New York. I related to Peter because I knew what it was like to be bullied. It didn't matter to me he was a boy. It didn't matter to me he had superpowers. I just understood what it was like to feel different and be on the outside. And I think that's the quality that should come first for relatability. That should be the first reason to bring people in. And then you can focus on diversity. But diversity should never be your first go-to. It's, again, my opinion. Now, speaking of diversity, the next reason I think people should give manga a chance, that is that there is a lot of diverse storytelling in manga. DC Marvel sticks to just superheroes. That's not a bad thing. It's worked for them for how long? I mean, since 1930 something. It is what they're known for. But some people want to find other avenues, other types of stories. Maybe something far more mature, something a little different than superheroes. And not to say comic books don't have that, because there's a lot of great indie stories. You have a lot from content creators who have their own crowdfunding. You have Image, Dark Horse, Boom, so many other studios who do more than just focus on like superheroes and supernatural. Manga is so diverse. You could find a manga for everyone. You could find a manga for your senior citizen grandfather. Okay? There is manga about food making. There is a manga about golf. I mean, seriously. There is manga about pets. There is manga, I know it sounds silly, but there is even manga about psychological thrillers. And I just did a review on Blood on the Tracks, and that is one hell of a psychological thriller. I haven't even finished it yet because all the volumes are not out, but that's a great example of like a diversity in manga. You have, like I said earlier, books focused on romance. It could be heterosexual romance. It could be LGBT. You have comedies. There is a great manga I've been reading called The Way of the House Husband about a former Yakuza boss who gives it all up to marry the love of his life and be a stay-at-home husband. His adventures of cleaning house, grocery shopping, going to the local community center to do exercise and all, but he does it through the lens of somebody who used to be a Yakuza. It's hilarious. I would recommend it. It is very, very funny. There's all ages. There's things for younger kids. Not saying comics don't have that, but I mean there's a lot more. And I feel like sometimes, especially the big two, forget there's a wide range of people who love these characters, and they need to kind of like give something for everybody. And they fail at it a lot. I know there are some more adult themed books. There used to be Vertigo with DC. There used to be stuff like that, but I feel kind of like they're way too dependent on their core characters, and I feel like they think they might be invincible because of the long legacy those core characters have. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is affordability. Now, yes, you have ways to get comic books cheap, but let me tell you about something called the Shonen Jump app. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments, if you wanted to do Marvel or DC, there is a fee of, I think it's now $7.99 a month, maybe $5.99, but that doesn't include the price for new comics. You actually have to buy the digital copies of the new comics, and sometimes you have to wait a few months before those new comics are available on the apps. Manga has the Shonen Jump app, which is only $1.99 rounded off to $2 a month, and you get unlimited access to a large library of manga, especially new manga, and there are new chapters dropping every week unless the creator decides to take a hiatus. You could be reading My Hero Academia's latest chapter every week, the week it comes out. You do not have to wait a few months for it to drop. You don't have to deal with the whole great manga shortage at your local bookstore or comic book shop to grab the physical copies, because it takes forever, first off, for the volumes to come here, and because of the current situation, it's taking even longer to get them in stock. I am still waiting for the box sets 1 through 3 in One Piece, okay? I did get the latest one, but that's only because it's the newest. The Shonen Jump app gives you so much access. I mean, if you want to read the full Dragon Ball, you can. It is so much more bang for your buck than having a Marvel or DC app, or even buying the physical copies. Because let me explain something. You get multiple chapters in a volume for manga, and that could be up to 100 to 200 pages depending on the manga, and they range in price from anything from $7.99 to $12.99, unless you're getting like one of their omnibuses. So you're getting what you're probably paying for the premium Batman comic right now. More story. I just kind of feel like it is much more feasible financially for manga than it is at times for comic books. And plus, once again, you're not having to buy all these spin-off books to get the full story of whatever current event is happening in DC or Marvel. Because that was one thing I always hated, is like, I don't feel like I need to read like some secondary character's comic just to get the full story of what's happening with Iron Man in whatever situation they've put him in now. You don't have to do that. You really don't. And I just feel like, and you can disagree with me, and that's fine. We can have a discussion about it. But I find that manga is, once again, more affordable. You have different options. Like I said, you have the app. You could buy the volumes. Sometimes a box set could definitely be more cost efficient in the long run, especially with long series like One Piece, because you're buying like multiple volumes at once. And if you, depending on the box set, because there are some that aren't as cost efficient, you'd be saving money than buying each individual volume. And I think it's also like, I think comic book readers, and this is my final thoughts on this, need to get past the stereotypes they hear about manga, kind of overlook the lack of color pages, because there is starting to become more colored manga. I believe High School of the Dead has full colored versions now. Even Attack on Titan has one. There's so much good story in there. If you can look past the lack of colored pages, the style of reading them, you're going to find really great stories. You're going to find a lot of diverse storytelling in manga. And you might be pleasantly surprised. I mean, don't judge, as they say, ironically, a book by its cover. I would suggest give it a chance, and maybe start with the Shonen Jump app, since it's the most affordable option. We need to take more chances on different stuff, because obviously DC and Marvel is going to keep on this path until finally something triggers things and major changes take place. If you have money and you want to invest in good storytelling, check out manga. All right? Look and see what manga offers. Go ahead and dip your toes in. Start with one. Then who knows, you might go into another series. Then a third series. Or if you're like me, I now have 2 bookshelves full of series, plus like a whole wide variety of stuff in my queue on the Shonen Jump app. But we have to give it a chance. I know it might not be your art style, but there are different types of art style manga. It's not all the same, as I would call it, Dragon Ball or Yu-Gi-Oh type art. There is a lot of diverse art in manga, and you what you have to do is you just got to get out there and see. Now, next week, I'd like to also explain why I think indie comics should be given more of a chance. So I'll be doing another poll on that. So in the meantime, comment down below. Have you tried manga? Are you thinking about trying manga? Do you disagree with my opinions? That's fine. You could talk about it down below. I have no problem discussing difference of opinions. Don't forget to hit the like button, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.